There's a fly in here. Sorry, there's a fly in here. I tried to get out of the room before I started filming, but it's one of those little annoying flies that just keeps bouncing around. Hopefully he's gonna stay gone until the end. Well, shoot. Well, hopefully he's not gonna be too much of a bother until the end of the video. But if he is, we're just gonna have to deal with him. So what's up, everyone, and welcome back. I've been away for way too long, and I've missed you. I've missed making content, I've missed interacting with all of you, and sharing the love that's Rancher and Kubernetes and containers and cloud computing and, of course, coffee. Although today, it's water, because I live in the desert now. I've been with Rancher, now part of SUSE, since 2017, but I don't think that I've ever told you how I ended up there. When I first discovered Rancher in, mid-2016, I was doing stuff with Docker and Docker Compose, and my Compose environment was entirely managed by Ansible. I found Rancher, and I could tell that they were onto something, but at the time, Rancher, the product, wasn't able to do more than I could already do with my own custom setup, so I didn't start using it. Fast forward a year, and out of the blue, I got a message on LinkedIn from one of the founders of Rancher. He wanted to know if I was interested in some project work, and so we set up an interview for the following Monday. Over the weekend, I went back to look at Rancher, and I was totally blown away by how far they'd come. By then, I was kind of at the peak of what I could do with my own setup, and I was at serious risk of turning it into just a big ball of spaghetti. Rancher had real solutions for real problems that I myself was experiencing in the client environments that I managed, and those solutions would scale in a way that would also dramatically reduce my workload. So over the weekend, I converted my home environment to use Rancher, and by the interview on Monday, I had poked my head into every corner of the Rancher application, and I could share exactly what I liked about it and where I saw the product would fit in the overall container ecosystem. After that interview, the offer changed from a few hours a week to full-time, and other than a short side trip to build a crypto mining facility for a friend of mine, I've been with Rancher ever since. That's more than 4 years of growth and innovation that I've had the privilege to witness firsthand. And during that time, I moved from field engineering to product marketing, and then to working directly with all of you in the community. Rancher makes amazing products, and I've always said that even if I didn't work here, I'd still be trying to get everyone to use them. Of course, in 2017, Docker was the king, and Kubernetes was still catching up. That's not true today. Kubernetes is really the only game in town, and Rancher saw this and they made the switch to an all Kubernetes platform in 2018 with Rancher 2.0. As Kubernetes has evolved, so has Rancher, so I thought I'd share with all of you why the reasons that I chose Rancher in 2017 are even more valid today. Now, those reasons aren't just technical. Usually I talk about how to do stuff and tutorials and things like that, but I want to show you the people, the vision, and the processes that go into making the world's most popular open source Kubernetes management solution. There's a lot of information in here, so I'm going to release this as several smaller videos. At the end of each video and in the video description, I'll put links that you can click on to go forward or backwards in the list, and when appropriate, cards will appear above me in this corner. You can click on those to go to the other videos. Let's get started. First, some clarity. Some company wrote a blog the other day comparing Rancher to their Kubernetes distribution. That's like comparing horses to rocks. Rancher, the product, is a complete control plane for Kubernetes clusters in any environment. There are also Kubernetes distributions that Rancher, the company, brought with them into SUSE, namely RKE, RKE2, and K3S. K3S is special because Rancher, the company, created it and then donated it to the CNCF. Rancher, the product, runs in any Kubernetes cluster, and it can manage the local cluster and also deploy and manage Kubernetes clusters in other environments. You can deploy RKE clusters onto public or private cloud infrastructure. You can deploy hosted clusters into cloud providers. You can import existing clusters and manage them from within Rancher. You can adopt existing EKS clusters and take over their complete lifecycle management. When I say lifecycle management, I mean that you can not only deploy and manage workloads, but you can also upgrade and scale the physical cluster itself, even if you didn't deploy it originally from within Rancher. You can do this with K3S too, but since it's not backed by a cloud provider API, you can't scale the infrastructure. You can upgrade it, though, directly from within the Rancher UI, and K3S is so easy to use that adding more nodes to it is a walk in the park. My favorite thing about Rancher is the unified authentication. Once you connect Rancher to your backend identity provider, you can use those users and groups for role-based access control in all of your clusters. In today's Kubernetes world, Kubernetes is a commodity. Think of it like electricity. It doesn't matter where electricity comes from, only that it's there when you turn the light on. I see Kubernetes the same way. As long as it's certified by the CNCF, it's just Kubernetes. It's everywhere. That means that organizations can have clusters all over the place in AWS, Azure, GCP, DigitalOcean, bare metal, VMware, Proxmox, under a desk, Raspberry Pi. Honestly, how do you control access to all of those clusters? This is what people are calling cluster sprawl, and it's a real problem. Rancher is the solution to that problem. Connect Rancher to those clusters, and now you can control who has what level of access to which cluster. If someone joins the organization, just drop them in a group, and they get access to that group's clusters. If someone leaves the organization, just disable their account, and they instantly lose access to everything. You don't have to worry about configuring access in a dozen different locations, or worse, forgetting to disable an account in one of them after someone leaves. Data breaches are expensive, and Rancher can help keep your IDP and RBAC solutions sane. That's what a multi-cluster control plane does. It unifies access and management for your Kubernetes clusters under a single HA control cluster. Once that's done, it gives you the tools to make the rest of your job easier. The big things right now are multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. I don't know if they're big because that's what people want, or if people want them because they hear people talking about how big they are. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like when everyone wanted global server load balancing without realizing how difficult it was to ship database content across the country and back again. It doesn't actually matter if it's the chicken or the egg, because Rancher can help you with both. First, Rancher runs in any Kubernetes cluster. It always has, even though for a long time we only officially supported it in RKE and then K3S clusters. That changed with Rancher 2.5 last year, and now you can run it in any Kubernetes cluster. You can even back it up in one cluster and restore it in a different cluster and move the whole thing from one provider to another. If you've taken the Rancher Academy classes that I put together, I talk about how you can't go from the standalone Docker version to the HA Kubernetes version. That was in Rancher 2.3. Now, you totally can. You just back up your Docker version and restore it into an HA Kubernetes cluster, and boom, you're ready to go. All of the technology, all of the infrastructure is yours. The Rancher deployment, it's yours. And Rancher's not going to tell you what to do, where to go, or impose any limits on what you need to do for your environment. The biggest challenge with multi-cloud deployments is with synchronizing workloads across multiple clusters. Rancher does this with Fleet, a GitOps solution that we built to manage up to 1 million clusters. Okay. What? 1 million clusters? Who runs 1 million clusters? That's what I hear whenever I say 1 million clusters, and think about it. Think about the future of Kubernetes. It's such a great solution that you're just going to see it everywhere. It's going to be in every streetlight, every ATM, every car in a company fleet, every military vehicle, every satellite, every UAV. When you've got 500,000 ATMs running Kubernetes workloads, you want them all to be identical. Fleet's going to do that for you. Now, Fleet itself is open source, and you can use it in any Kubernetes environment. I mean, you don't need Rancher for it. We've just included it in Rancher to make your life easier. Next up, you can use Rancher to manage hybrid cloud environments. And I don't mean you can use Rancher to deploy clusters that span an on-prem and cloud environment. You could. Yeah, you totally could do that. You could use custom clusters to do that, but that's a fragile solution. Like my mom used to say, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it. Hybrid cloud is another one of those buzzwords that doesn't have a clear meaning. If you have a cluster on-prem that uses S3, is that a hybrid cloud? If your EKS cluster can use storage on your local NetApp, is that hybrid cloud? To me, it just sounds like a bad design. But if you go looking for hybrid cloud, you'll find that everyone has a hybrid cloud story, even if that story sucks. It's important to start by recognizing that Kubernetes doesn't have a good story for hybrid cloud. That's just not what it was designed for. The best way to think of it is probably in terms of federation, where a central control plane manages a group of clusters and treats those clusters as resource pools for workload deployment. They're still independent clusters, each with their own control plane, but the workloads that they run are assigned and managed by the central control plane. Wait a minute. That sounds familiar. That's Rancher and Fleet. But instead of using multiple cloud providers, you have a cluster on-prem and others in the cloud. Do you see how Rancher cuts right to the core of what's useful? With one solution, we've covered a myriad of different scenarios, from a single cluster to multi-cloud to hybrid cloud, all the way out to 1 million clusters running at the edge, all working together. It doesn't matter where you want to put Kubernetes or how you get it there. Rancher will meet you wherever you are. Are you running on bare metal with no hypervisor? Well, check out Harvester, our open source HCI 2.0 solution that uses Kubernetes and kubevert to run VMs as pods. Are you running Docker? Rancher deploys RKE, which is Kubernetes that runs in Docker containers. This is still 100% upstream Kubernetes, but because it runs entirely in containers, it's way more resilient than a direct-to-host installation using something like kubeadm. You can do amazing things with RKE, like upgrades, downgrades, predefined cluster templates, and if you want, you can even change the control and data plane architecture on the fly. Okay, I hear some of you right now being like, come on, Adrian, what does that even mean? It means that you can start with a 1-node RKE cluster and then expand it to a 3-node HA cluster and add worker nodes on the fly. You can go the other direction too. You can take a 3-node cluster and turn it into a single node cluster. You can define different node pools for the roles, and you can scale them independently from one another. Rancher will even detect unresponsive nodes and redeploy them for you automatically, assuming you're in a cloud provider where it can talk to the API. Now, maybe you're one of the people that wants to move away from Docker because you're concerned about deprecated support for Docker shim and Kubernetes. The internet will tell you that that's a big deal, and other portions of the internet will correctly tell you that it's not a big deal. It's actually not as big of a deal as everyone makes it out to be, but it's true. Kubernetes only needs a container runtime engine. Docker itself uses containerd as its CRI, but they bundle it with Swarm and some other stuff that Kubernetes doesn't need. RKE2 and K3s both use containerd and ship as a single binary that unpacks into a complete Kubernetes cluster. If you're already using RKE and you want to continue using it, but you're still worried about Docker shim, don't worry. Mirantis said that they will maintain Docker shim for Kubernetes as a third-party extension, and when that's available, RKE will support it. As of Rancher 2.5, you're not yet able to deploy RKE2 or K3s from the UI. We know that's an important capability that people want, and we are working on adding that functionality in a future Rancher release. So instead of a host that only needs Docker, which is what we needed for RKE, if you're using RKE2 or K3s, all you need is a host, no dependencies. You can strip that host down to the minimum number of resources so that you can reduce the attack surface. A bunch of years ago, Rancher created Rancher OS, and it was a container operating system with a minimal attack surface. It's great, but it's built on Docker. The world is moving on, and Rancher is currently developing a successor that leverages patterns of immutable infrastructure while also removing Docker from the mix. Immutable infrastructure and tiny specific operating systems are the future of the story of Kubernetes on the edge, where right now, K3s reigns supreme. The edge is another one of those places where big business has perverted the meaning of the word. Edge environments are often presented as superpowered micro data centers positioned near consumers. But that's not really what the edge is. The edge is the edge. It's that place way out there at the fringe where a Kubernetes workload is responsible for something like a wind turbine or sensors that feed data into something that has to make a decision, and where it might not have network connectivity to offload that decision to something more powerful. You can't put a massive server farm on the top of a wind turbine or in a U2 plane or a satellite. So to do justice to Kubernetes at the edge, we need to consider small computers, possibly embedded systems or systems that are running on ARM hardware with a small amount of CPU and RAM. These already exist all over the world, in the air and even in space, and they're powered by K3s. Rancher created K3s, and we donated it to the CNCF to demonstrate our commitment to keeping it open and to hand its governance to the same people who govern the future of Kubernetes. Donating a project It's not throwing it over the wall for somebody to pick up off the ground. It requires that it also be accepted. And the CNCF chose to accept K3s because of its potential for the future of Kubernetes. Finally, there are air-gapped environments, yet another place that other companies have changed the meaning to suit their products. This whole thing, by the way, is called washing. It's like dash washing. Well, whatever. It's called washing. You'll run into it with terms like greenwashing, where companies make it sound like their products are environmentally sound to try and get you to buy them. There's also cloud washing, where companies take a product and then they put it on a cloud instance to say it's cloud native. So now what do we got? Edge washing, air gap washing, hybrid cloud washing. How about if we just call it a bunch of hooey designed to take advantage of confusion in the market and give people a false sense of security? It's so easy to be honest. I genuinely do not understand why so many companies choose to lie. Oh man, there's that fly again. He just flew right. You know, that's kind of how I see these other companies. They lie about their capabilities, or worse, they lie about Rancher's capabilities. They're like the annoying buzz of a fly. So you know what? Let's just ignore that fly. Let's focus on what matters. Solutions that have value for you. Let's get this clear. An air-gapped environment is a computer or network that is not connected to the internet. Period. Now, some companies will say that their Kubernetes solution works in an air-gapped environment if your hosts connect to the internet through an HTTP proxy. Well, guess what? That's called connecting to the internet. That's not an air-gapped environment. Rancher has been a leader in air-gapped installations since before Rancher was all in on Kubernetes. We publish clear and concise instructions on how to do real air-gap, where an environment has no connection to the internet whatsoever. Rancher, RKE, K3s, and RKE2 all contain an image list and scripts for downloading and preparing a laptop or another system to be the installation mirror for that environment, so that an administrator can go into a secure environment and perform a fully disconnected install or upgrade. You can have your computers in a cave with a really long extension cord, and we'll still get Kubernetes and Rancher running there. This is the kind of security that banks and governments expect, and it's what we deliver. In the next video, I'll tell you about why Rancher started and then pivoted, and how Rancher and SUSE give you an adaptable and all-encompassing solution that goes beyond Kubernetes.